Hi everyone, welcome to yet another episode of podcast in Madlux VFX. Today we have Piyush Jain with us, and without any delay, let's jump into the podcast. Hi Piyush,
Hey
how are
guys.
you?
Hey. I'm good. How are you, Manoj? How are you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm good. I'm good too. So how is work going on?
Oh, as hectic as usual. I think I've mentioned it a few times now. If it's not hectic, then it's a problem. If it's hectic, then it's fun.
Understood. I can understand that. So for all my listeners who are new to here, can you give a casual intro about yourself?
Okay. Hey, I'm Piyush Jain. I work as a pipeline TD in Framestore. I've been in the industry for quite a while. I think I started in late 2010. I joined in as a creative. Like I worked into stereo for some time, then moved into technical in 2012, and I've been in the same field, jumping from Mumbai to Vancouver, and now sitting down in Montreal.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
what's
my
your-
small
yeah.
and nice.
Yeah, what's your educational background? Like, what have you studied in your college?
So my educational background is I'm a computer engineer, computer science engineer. I did my BTech from I think back in 2006 2010, and as soon as I finished, I jumped into movies. Like complete opposite of what I should have done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a classically trained computer science engineer. So I did all my runs of C, C++, Visual Basic, .NET, and all that.
Yeah. And finally, you're settled in Pipeline TD, which is kind of
Settled
similar.
in Pipeline TD.
Yeah.
That's a funny turn of events. Started trying to learn coding and then saying that I don't want to code ever in my life, to just doing coding for living. Yeah, so that was good.
Yeah. So like I just want to know, like, what is this Pipeline TD role, or what are the main duties of a Pipeline TD in a VFX studio pipeline?
Okay, so just to clarify, there are a couple of divisions in pipeline itself. Like when you've heard the common statement, "Oh, you're working in animation," even though you're not. It's visual effects. So it's something similar with pipeline. So almost every studio has their own set of teams. They have their set of distinctions. Specifically in Framestore, I would say the distinction is there are a certain section of people within the pipeline team. They would work on tools and codes that are software related, like they would be Maya, Houdini, Cinema 4D, Unreal, Nuke, all these. Then there's a certain section of team that would work on codes and tools deployment and development for production tools, like Shotgun or RV or F-Track or other and any other tools that production usually uses, or it's used for managing the production side of things. Now then there is a specific section of team that I am a part of, that's the core pipeline team that works on asset management, that works on basically connecting or building the base layer where everything is built upon. Like I would handle databases, you would handle anything that touches almost every other part of the pipeline. You end up doing that. You work on core libraries, you work on deployment strategies, you work on setup strategies, like show. It sounds very easy, like show setup sounds very, but there are other things, like you have to set up Shotgun, you have to set up the review system, you have to set up the database, you have to make sure that any site that goes into, also gets that. How do you connect both of them? So all these strategical planning and development, that's the core pipeline. Now, then there is another section of the pipeline team that works on supporting that. That is called as ATDs, or assistant technical directors. So they help with, these are like our first line of support. When we deploy something, these guys use it, help production being trained. They talk to the production team if there's an issue. They'll try to fix it. If they can't fix it, then they jump back to us. Now, this is Framestore way of working. But if you talk about my older company, Prime Focus, there was no ATD team. I used to work with Nuke as well. I used to work with Ion Fusion as well, or say Blackmagic Fusion now, or I have to work with SFX and everything. So my team and myself, we would help, write tools for those specific softwares. We would work on the database management side of things as well. So it can be complete general one, like you can be a general pipeline TD that you do basically jack of all, master of none, like thinking you would take on this, you will take on some other part of the pipeline, you take something going off in Nuke, so you start looking into that. I want to set up a Nuke pipeline or a Nuke template system, sort of Nuke review system. You start working on that thing as well. But in companies like bigger companies like Prime Focus, in DNEG or Framestore or MPC, they have certain section of teams, like, you handle a certain part of the pipeline. It's not that you won't touch them, but like your expertise starts getting built around that.
Yeah,
that's the overgeneralization of what a pipeline TD role is.
Yeah, I mean, I heard there is a job role known as Comp TD. So what does that specifically means?
So Comp TD is okay. So then there is like you do FX TDs as well. You have rigging TDs as well. So mostly these are senior guys, and they would help you with either fixing the problems on the creative side of things. Like, for example, you have an issue when you did a retime, right, on your comp, and it's not working out. There's some black frames, there's some pixels who are like, some NAND pixels are coming out. How to fix it? A comp TD would jump in the comp, would try to fix that. Or he might take up a very difficult shot on his own and say, okay, I'll do this, I'll get this set up. And I think in Framestore, the comp TD would be also set up the templates so that comp team would use that to finish up their shots. Or if they want to render out a sequence, they would use that template. So that's something a comp TD would work at.
Yeah. So I just want to know, like, is it important to learn the software for a pipeline TD? Do I need to learn Nuke or Maya in that case if I want to become a pipeline TD?
Okay, so this is the thing, right? Like, I have not worked in Maya at all. Like, I am not, if you ask me, hey, Piyush, do this, figure out something in Maya. It would take me some time, but I'll be able to figure it out. But then I have my colleague, I called him the master of Maya. So, I would want him to figure that problem because it's for him, it would be much quicker because he understands why this is breaking. Like, for example, very simple example, like there's a frame jump going on. It would take me half an hour to work out. It might take him 10 minutes to work out. So if you are working, if your aim is, I want to be, write tools around Maya, I want to support that software. It is obviously advantageous for you to learn that software. But if you want to be a pipeline TD, if you want to, like, for example, in my case, if you want to work on the core tools, you don't have to learn the software. Having a vague idea also helps. Like, from all of the tools, I think I understand Nuke the best. So if you give me a problem with Nuke, I would be able to solve it quicker because I understand or I know how Nuke works in the background. But again, might not be able to happen with Houdini, right? But again, Houdini TDs would work only on fixing the problems that are related to Houdini. So again, if your aim is, I want to support this specific software, or I have learned this software, or I've used this software, it's always good to have that,
Got it. So talking about the scripting languages and all, which all are the main scripting languages used in the VFX and animation industry?
Okay, so when you talk about languages, there are a few. There are a couple of languages that are inbuilt into the software, like Maya has Mel, right? But then there is again, the problem with,
like, from an outsider point of view, I just know Mel, Python. That's it.
Okay, so that's the thing. So Mel is again just specifically built for Maya. It would not do it. It can do few things, but it will only be inside Maya. Like, you open up Maya, you run a Mel script, and then it will do stuff. But that's not the case, right? So Python is the most prominent, most popular, and widely used language in VFX. Reason being because every major software you have, may it be Houdini, may it be Nuke, may it be Blackmagic Fusion, may it be Maya, may it be Unreal even, they all have links to Python. You can actually write codes for them in Python. Like, even Silhouette, which is not well known for writing codes for, or even 3D Equalizer for that matter, they all have a Python interface or a Python API that you can use and that you can work for. But when you talk about general pipeline sense, because it's not about software, as I mentioned, then you have other softwares like Rust, which is an upcoming. It's an old language, but it is really good, and I've seen it being popular. Like, in the last SIGGRAPH sessions, there were a few that actually there were talks about how to implement Rust in your pipeline.
Oh, what is the name of that?
Rust. RUST.
Rust. Okay.
So
hearing for the first time.
It's not popular in the sense not everyone would use it, but this is more on the core side of things. Now you have stuff like Golang. That's a language from Google. Golang is fairly quick, lot of smaller studios and a lot of studios are trying to implement their pipeline around it. The reason being very simple. It's very quick. It's quick to learn as well. It does things really nicely. It plays well with Docker. So there are a few background things that Golang does very well. So that's one of the things. And then you have your most conventional C++. Now, when I say C++, is because most of the studios are Linux based, not Windows. And C, you would write plugins in C++. You would write system tools in C++. So I have written certain tools in C. I'd never done C programming. I have done in college, but not in the last 8 years. But I have written some things in C, so that because the only way to communicate with the system is through C, because Linux everything is built on. So these are the few languages that obviously helps. Then there is we haven't even touched on the database languages. It can get covered under SQL or no SQL if certain studios use that. But these two are also coding languages. These are database centric. You control, you manage, you develop, or you deploy your databases through that. So that would be other languages that are most prominent in VFX.
Got it. I also heard about there is one language in Nuke that is BlinkScript. Is it same the C++ or is it different from that?
I think it's Nuke specific. So how Mel does, I think it's Nuke specific. I haven't personally used BlinkScript a lot. I haven't had a chance, but I think that's specifically built around
for the Nuke
and to write certain tools around that.
I mean, I saw many tutorials in internet. People are curious to learn BlinkScript as well because it helps a lot. I heard.
I won't be the best judge on that, but yes, I think so. I think it does help you fix a few problems. Like, for example, if I'm not wrong, don't take my word for it, but if I'm not wrong, when you write macros and tools in Nuke, I think you can make them quicker and faster when you're doing it through BlinkScript.
The same I heard.
It abstracts the whole, because when you're doing a macro, you're basically building tools and then using the predefined tools. So you end up, ballooning it up. I think with BlinkScript you can not do that.
Got it. Nowadays, we are hearing a lot about Python. Learning Python, and there are courses for learning Python. So how easy is learning Python for Nuke, especially for Nuke, and especially for a senior compositor?
See, I would personally, I know I said that I have a computer science background and I've learned coding in college, but my aim was never to go and do proper coding. So I was surprised. I surprised myself when I was, I would say, adequate when I started off at coding. So my personal belief is anyone can learn Python. Python is, I think, the easiest language to learn if you want to start coding or if you have interest in coding. And one with Nuke, it's the amount of information that Nuke itself provides it. The Nuke documentation, the API documentation, it is mind blowing. I've seen one of my friends in Framestore. He started off writing small chunks, and now he's bloody good at it. And he's been at it for almost a year, but he's really good at it now. And to the point where initially I started helping out with just doing small code reviews, but he blew my mind away with the amount of code and the tool that he wrote. It's really interesting. So for a senior compositor, I think it's easy to pick up because you already are interacting with Nuke in a way where you understand expressions. You have seen Nuke scripts that are filled with these small expressions, custom tools, and all that. So jumping into Python should not be a problem. So then, in my understanding, it's a clear distinction. So to learn Python is something else, but to learn Python for Nuke is something else. So definitely would recommend start taking the most basic Python course. At least you'll understand the schematics, you'll understand the syntaxes, because those things are important. And if you're a first time learner, like if you have no background of coding at all, like you have never touched coding at all in your past, I would definitely recommend start from the most basic Python tutorial. Like you just do Python 101 on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure there might be 1,000 results that you'll get.
Yeah, of course.
Go through that. It will explain you about variables, loops. It will explain you about functions, classes. Once you understand that, and once you know, okay, fine, I can do this way, then it's very easy for you to jump. The reason why it is important is because, for example, like in a very, very straightforward example,
got it.
You want 20 background nodes in your nuke. If you don't know about loops, what you'll do is you'll do import nuke.add node background background, then the name, then you write that down 20 times. But if you know loops, then you can finish all of that into 2 lines. Either you do a for loop or you do a while loop. So it's very simple, right? If you know the background knowledge, like same thing with compositing, right? You can't just jump in and say, no, I'm gonna comp a shot without understanding how layer interaction works, how AB works, how addition works, how the merge processes work. Like you can't do that. So it's something similar with coding as well. Like you have to understand the basic first, then may it be Nuke, may it be Maya, may it be Houdini, may it be any software that you can pick up. All of them have a good documentation, good API, and you can easily learn it.
Yeah.
But first step, understand the basics.
Yeah. Got it. So, and finally, the effort you're putting in, right?
Exactly. Like it's gonna take time. It's obviously not going to be an easier journey.
Yeah.
One thing, always understand, like that's the principle that I think Framestore specifically has taught me is your code is it's not important. It's you can scrap your code anytime you want, or your code will get scrapped anytime you want. So don't get attached to it. Don't be I have done it. Like I saw a code that I wrote 6 months ago. I'll go in and I'll start rewriting chunks of it. I might not rewrite the whole thing, but I might start rewriting, I should not do it this way, because you keep on learning, right? You keep on saying, I can do this in a different way. I can, abstract it. I can, put it up into different thing. I can handle this situation differently. So that's something that should always be open for.
Got it. So talking about the learning stuff and YouTube and all these things, what are some of the resources you prefer or you follow regularly? For example, you can tell about blogs you follows or YouTube channels you follows.
Okay, so first, I think one of the most intriguing one that I found, and that I'm actually quite a ardent reader of, it's called Real Python. I think realpython.org. They have really nice books, really nice tips and tricks from like person who's just starting off to person who's at an intermediate or an advanced level. Like small, like if I pick up a Python book these days, right? At least the first 10, 20 chapters for me are like, I know this already. Come on, tell me something new. But with them, they come out with an advantage of saying, hey, I know you know about, like there's a term called dictionary in coding. And they'll give you a certain very specific thing. You know what? You can do this as well. This might be an obscure thing that is there in the Python documentation, but probably, you have to scroll down to the end to learn that. But with examples, so I would definitely recommend start looking at Real Python. They do release books, and if you're a member, you get them for cheap also. Like if it's a $30 book, you might get it for like $12 or something. And it's nice. It's pretty decent. It covers a lot of things. Like it covers stuff like C Python. It covers proper Python, obviously. And then it has a lot of courses going on. It has its own podcast as well, if you want to check it out.
Nice.
So I definitely would do that. For YouTube specifically, I don't have a channel that I look forward for. But if I want to learn certain specific, I think I would end up just searching it out and then going through a couple of videos. Because the thing is, for me, I would say unfortunately, the thing is, my approach, like if I'm learning something, my approach is very different from someone who's just starting off. So someone who's just starting off, just type in, Python 101, in beginner Python courses. You'll get a lot of tutorials. Stick to one, pick it up, and that's good. if you want to learn about books, there is a very good book called Dive into Python. Like I think that's what I started off as well. Do that. I think there's a couple of O'Reilly publication books around Python as well. Python cookbook or something like that.
Okay.
Check it out. It's good. But my suggestion would be, if you pick up something, just finish that off from start to finish, because it's very easy. Like, you're done halfway and then you want to jump something else, but they approach it very differently. And if you're a beginner, you might get confused, which is normal. Like, has happened to me before. I'm not saying that I was immune from it, but then the thing was like, okay, I'll pick up a book, go through it from like first page till the last page, and then I'll start doing something else. So at least I have one basic, level ready to jump into something else. So I understand why this person was doing it in a different way than my older book. So that's something I think that's important.
We spoke about many scripting languages. So is mainly about Mel and Python. Is there any similarities between both these languages? And if yes, what are they? And can you explain that in simple terms so that the listeners who are not into Python or not into pipeline stuff can also understand about that?
See, I would say there is a similarity in almost all the languages. Like Mel and Python specifically, the core logic on every language is the same. Like you take up from the oldest language that is currently being used in VFX is C, and then you take the newest language like Golang or Rust or Python is also old, but these newer languages, higher level languages. Logic is same. Like if you there is a concept of variables in almost every languages. There is a concept of loops in every other languages. There is a concept of constants in every language. So these logic would remain same. Now how you write it will be very different. Like how you say, okay, I want to do a loop, a for loop in Python. That would look very different to what you might do in C or C++ or Rust or Golang or even Mel. But then the logic is the same. The logic is simple. The logic would be, you start from one, you do something, then you jump into the other, and then you do something else, and then you jump back again till the counter finishes. Like if you say, I want to run this 10 times, it's going to run it 10 times. It's going to run it 10 times on all the languages. So logic is same. So if you want to pick up something, you can do that. Now the differences comes in is called syntactics, like how you write things. Now Mel, when you talk about, since you asked about Mel and Python specifically, now Mel was written to help code stuff in Maya, right? So it has certain tools, certain functions. Like I want to traverse the hierarchy of an object in the attributes editor or something like in Outline. I can do that in Mel. I can do the exact same thing in Python. I'll have, I think the function name would approximately look the same, but how you write it will be very different. So it has both of them, but again, since Python is much more popular, so you would end up finding more people who would write codes in Python compared to it. So a lot of studios ended up with not scrapping the Mel code, but like reducing the dependence on the Mel code, because then you have developers. Like for example, if you talk to, I don't know Mel code well because I have not worked with Maya, and I haven't worked with Maya when Mel was popular enough that I would end up coding in Mel. But if you give me a Python code in Maya, I might be able to debug it better because I understand what's going on. And if you give me a function, it's easier for me to go to Autodesk documentation and then take a look at that. So differences is syntactics, similar is logics.
And I think scripting or coding might be the future, and everyone is looking forward to learn that. So according to you, what are the skill sets needed for becoming a pipeline TD?
I think this would be an overloaded question. Like as I mentioned, like if your aim is to write codes for Nuke, then first and foremost, get yourself confident or get yourself accustomed to how Nuke works. Like spend some time understanding, it's easy. Like, okay, I want to be a pipeline TD, or I want to be a COM TD, or I want to write tools for Nuke. But what tool? Unless you don't get that, saying, oh, this is what's hampering me, I want to write a code for that, right? Unless you don't understand that, it would be very difficult because no one would come along and say, hey, you know what, figure out something and write. But what? Like you need that initial push or initial idea. Like I'll give you a very basic example. On one of my home projects, I was taking some pictures and I wanted to just say, okay, as soon as I plug in my camera card on my laptop, I wanted something where, okay, I did it on August 21st. So I wanted to create a folder and then copy all of those over to there. But I don't want to do it manually. I don't want to do it every time. So that's a problem that I have. So my solution would be, I'll write a code that would go to the camera memory card. It'll pick up whatever files it finds under that dated name. I can read the dates, and then I copy them over. I'll create a folder and I'll copy them. Straightforward. That's the problem that I have. I understood what the problem I had, and now I have a solution. Something similar would happen when you're starting off with writing any tool. You'll have to understand what's the problem. Like right now, if you push me into thick of things, saying, hey, you know what, tracking team is having an issue. What I would do is I would sit down with the tracking suit or the tracking head or the HOD for the department. Okay, explain me what's going on, what's happening. Can you show me step by step what is that you would want to repeat, or what's bugging you, what's taking time. So that's something, a problem solving skill I think would be very ideal for a pipeline team, because it would not be very set specific things that you'll get. You might get thrown into, oh, my database stopped working. Figure it out. I don't know. Like Houdini suddenly stopped working. I can't figure out what's not working. So that approaching how a problem needs to get fixed, or what might be causing a problem, that's something that's an attitude that if you develop it, it's well and good. I think when you would be working, you would have realized, hey, something is not working out for me. Now I need to figure out why it is not. And if it's a one-time thing, then you don't need to write a code for it. But if it's happening again and again, and it's happening for multiple people, then you think would be, okay, fine, I need to write something, or I need to write a tool, or I have to write a code, or I have to write something that helps me with that problem. Obviously, having scripting knowledge is well and good, but my thing is that it's easier to learn, like to get into Python or get into scripting language, but to be good at it, it takes time. Like for anyone who has, if someone says that I know 100% of Python, I'm the expert of Python, I'm like, skepticism comes in, because such a huge language you cannot understand. But there are people who are really good at it, and you would want to learn from them. They would, they gives out tips and tricks, and then it's read as much as possible, try out new things. But obviously, learn a language. Python, obviously, it's easier to learn. Just start off with that first, and then start looking out for issues. Oh, okay, this is a problem. I'll try to see what I can do about it. So that would be, I think, the most bare basic skill sets needed. But again, this is if you are thinking about jumping into core Python, then you need to learn a bit more. Like it would be good if you understand about databases. It would be good if you understand, Linux commands. If you learn things about SSH, or if you learn about, so not SSH, about how Linux systems works, or because it's a different subset. So certain things might be required. So get yourself accustomed to certain things. But then, so I think that's the most basic.
Got it. I know there are many institutes and online platforms are there for learning visual effects and animation, but I'm not aware of, like, is there an institute for learning pipeline stuff? And I know there are institutes which teach us scripting and all these things, but I don't know specifically for visual effects if it is there or not.
I haven't come across to myself, to be honest.
The same.
But then I have, because again, the funda is that you don't, as I mentioned, right? Like if you want to learn, or if you want to write tools for a software, you need to learn the software first. So I think I would definitely recommend start off with that, and then on the side start learning. Like you have Udacity, you have Udemy, and you have Coursera and all these things. You can start learning at least the coding side of things, like at least understand the basic. And I think these are very, very cheap courses, and you can pick it up, or from YouTube, just pick that up.
I was just curious about, like, is there any courses completely visual effects based or animation pipeline based?
I don't
or something like that. Because I got a lot of messages, like people want to learn from the basics and they don't want to jump into the Python, the sea of the ocean of Python. They just want to jump into this specifically board which is related to Nuke or which is related to Maya. So I got a lot of questions and I'm not aware of any such institute. So I was just wondering if you know anything like that.
I'm pretty sure there aren't any, but I have seen books that are related to coding for Maya or something like that. So I've seen the books. I haven't seen any tutorials specifically for that. But again, apart from videos, there are a lot of documentation from the companies itself. Like Nuke has an amazing selection of tools if you want to get into Nuke scripting, or if you want to, and it has some really nice good pages about introduction, and it goes step by step. Okay, type this this will show up, or if you want to select a node, then do that. So I would recommend try doing that with Autodesk as well. Like just go through the documentation, and they have their own tutorials. But I don't think there is a course for that. When I started off, they were pretty sure there were not any courses. So right now, I don't think there are any.
I mean, nowadays we could find a lot of tutorials and courses in YouTube for free. Maybe in future, a Pipeline DD, or maybe tomorrow you can start a YouTube channel and start teaching about this stuff.
Who knows?
Future is very unpredictable, Yeah, so got it. Now we have spoken a lot about the scripting languages and all these things. So let's talk something about yourself. So when you were in college, were you having a plan of becoming a Pipeline DD when you were in college? If yes, what knowledge or experience from college helps you in work currently? Now you're Pipeline DD working in Framestore. So what knowledge from college helped you or helping you right now?
So I think, to be very honest, no. When I was doing my engineering, there's this funny instances between me and my friends where I claimed, on top of my voice, that I would never want to sit down and do code, code for my livelihood. I would never sit down and code for 10 hours straight. I didn't have any plans. I wanted to get into creative. I wanted to work in films. I wanted to work with on the creative side of things.
Yeah. Just to stop you there. From which city you graduated?
I graduated from Indore. That's in central India.
Yeah, Madhya Pradesh, right?
Yeah, MP.
Yeah.
And I think this was back in 2010. As soon as my college finished up, I decided I'll pack. There was a lot of I was a good student. I had enough percentage to sit in any of the IT company interviews. That's the jazz that happens. During the fourth year. So I got a lot of calls from my parents got a lot of calls from the college saying that, hey, Piyush is not sitting in any of the interviews. And they were like, yeah, I know, because his plan is not to actually go into IT industry and wear a tie and a shirt and a pant and then go to work at 9 and come back at 6. No, I didn't want to do that. So as soon as college ended up, I packed up my bags and moved to Mumbai with a few friends of mine. And so I started off in Prime Focus as a stereo roto artist.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun then. Did got my non 9 to 6 hours, not going home for
understood the industry.
Yeah, understood the industry. But it was fun because again, was young, wanted to learn as much as I could, and I pushed as much as I could at that time.
And it's needed.
I think, and ended up becoming they opened up a new department that I ended up becoming a suit for. But then I got bored. I was like, yeah, I think it's not something new that I'm learning. It's the same. And it's not visual effects. There's a lot of learning capacity. There's not learning opportunities. So for me, I was like, okay, what more I could do?
Yeah.
And obviously I had learned coding. I knew how to code. I knew how to read codes. And one day I was just sitting around and I saw a tool and I'm like, okay, how does this tool work? Then someone showed me what you can do. You can just go to the script editor and take a look. Looked at it, understood it, now started fixing some problems here and there. So people were like, okay, I think we might need someone, from in the pipeline and stereo division in India. There were none. So that was not good. I started off there, started interacting a lot with London and Vancouver that time. And then so they gave me an opportunity, like, why don't you, come down to Vancouver, just interact, push more, see what you can handle. So by that time I was handling a lot of things. But then the core thing that helped me, like, as per your question, was having that logic already cleared out for me. So I didn't have to spend time thinking, oh, if I want to go from A to B, what logic should I use? I already had that because I had done my, classical engineering training. So that's why it was easier for me. But then there are a lot of examples, like my team was filled up in prime focus who were not engineers by default, but they had learned on the job. And again, they were bloody good at it. So I would say it's not something that, it was good for me because it helped me then, but I don't think that's a requirement. But if you can learn it on the job, well and good. If you can learn it through watching videos or, working on small home projects, it's well and good. So that's what my journey from not doing, just getting into
like according to me, you were knowing what is alphabets, and you already know what is A, B, C, D, so it was easy for you to learn E, F, G and so on.
Like same, like I knew the basics, just had to start implementing them, start seeing that, okay, fine, I've learned it in the more classical sense where you would write tools or you would write softwares for the banks. Now I'm writing it for people who I can. So my biggest gripe about not going into IT industry was, like, if I write something, let's say a tool or a part of the tool, I would never see it being used in my life because it's buried under a lakh lines of code, a million lines of code, working on an ATM or on someone's web server. I would never see people actually using it or liking it or giving me feedback directly. It's gonna get trickled down. But in visual effects, that's not the case. Like, first tool I wrote, I could see people using it, some of them liking it, some of them giving me comments, what you should do, can you do this, can you do that? So that interaction is mind-blowing. Like, you would want people to use it, want you to give you feedback. You would see, hey, I was having this issue, now it's fixed, thanks. That kind of validation. I think that helped a lot. That helped me pushing myself more and more into learning and more developing my skills as a pipeline team.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, because of your pipeline and all these things, you're seeing the movie in theater, and wow, that's a feeling, right? And I have a follow-up question for that. So we will discuss in later. So a lot of people, might have already done the basic learning, and they want to pursue a career in scripting or pipeline. So what are the ways does a pipeline TD can showcase their work? Or is there any, like, for Rhodopaint artists or for compositors, they can show through show reels, but I'm curious to know in what way they can showcase their work.
So I have taken a few interviews in my life, in my lifetime, with handling teams and so I would look for a person who understands the concepts rather than because we don't have a show reel. We don't have the concept of creating show reels or something like that in the pipeline TD when you're going for interviews or when you're taking interviews for a pipeline TD.
Just to stop you there, like what all are the concepts? Is it like concepts related to the software or general? Go ahead.
I'll elaborate a bit more. So then there is something called as Git, right? So you end up writing your tools and you upload that onto Git that anyone can take a look. It could be a public repository. It's kind of your showing that, okay, I have worked on my free time. Obviously you can't post your company project.
Of course,
that's another thing. But the thing is, that's one thing that is not very prolific, is because if you're spending so much time working, like imagine 8-10 hours sitting in front, and you guys know that well. It's hardly any time you get for your own personal projects. You would want to spend time, doing something else. Like yours might be a creative outlet, yours might be something else. So when I took an interview, the concept that I was talking about was, if you say that, hey, I have worked in Nuke for last 10 years, then my questions would revolve around, okay, tell me how would you solve a problem in Nuke? Okay, so tell me how does the Nuke app, if I want to write something in Nuke, how would I write something, a tool in Nuke, how the API would work, what are, what problems you have come across, what was your approach to solve a problem? Now, if you tell me that, I've worked in databases for last 5 years, then my question would be, okay, which ones? Then you explain me, okay, which ones. So I'll ask you basic questions like, okay, what core concepts in databases are, like, explain me inner join, explain me outer join. If you tell me, I had, written plugins for Maya, then my questions would revolve around, okay, explain me a bit more about, what was your approach towards that? What did the plugin do? What specific libraries were you using to write those plugins? Was it in C? Was it in C++? So all these are absolutely related to what your core competency is. Like if you say that, I have worked in core pipeline, I have written systems for asset transfers. Then I would ask you, okay, what were you using for asset transfers? What was your approach? How did you, went through the problem? Because this helps you explain or understand that what does that the other person know, or how much does he know? And let's say, for example, is he, faffing around? Is he, is he actually being true, right? So that's something that what happens is during an interview. Now, there are certain companies that take these coding interviews. They would, make you sit down for 2 hours and ask you to write a code. It's okay. It's obviously, it's nice you do that, but then it's hard to judge, someone's attitude, someone's,
approach,
what do you call it? Outlook towards, fixing a problem. How would you do that? Like you can't do it through, coding interview, because it's easier to crack them. You just have to bug up and then you can see, and it's very easy to do that. But then, having an interaction where anything could go anywhere, it's very difficult. So I think personally, if you want to get into it, first of all, if you define your level as, I'm a very beginner, all the interviewers, all the head of pipelines, like I personally, like for example, my head of pipeline here in Montreal, I know his questions would revolve completely around a beginner level one. If you say I'm intermediate, it would be that. Now, if you have a senior pipeline TD, you have had 10, 20 years of experience, his questions would revolve completely around that. So you just have to go with confidence, be sure that what you know is correct, be confident in that. I think that's it. Because it's not like when Framestore is looking for someone, it's always has to be, I want the senior most guy. No, because we can't. Let's talk about money part. You can't always obviously afford all senior guys in your team, and then you don't have work for all the senior guys in your team. So you want a good mix of junior level, mid level, senior level. If you are a junior level, then obviously you'll get jobs, or you'll get the tasks that are related to your skill set, and then you learn, you upgrade yourself, you get tougher and tougher, and at one point when you become a mid level, then your struck or your job task or your task will be very different. So if you are interested, if you want to go for it, I would say brush up your skills, keep your confidence, and you can apply. You can start applying, saying that, hey, I want to get into this. I've had enough experience in comping. I want to become a 2D pipeline guy, and this is what I can do. This is what I know already. And if the company is looking for someone like that, you'll get a job easily.
Great. And GitHub is a choice like for programmers and scripting guys, right?
So there is GitHub, there is Bitbucket, there is GitLab. So Git is kind of a concept where it's like a versioning system for codes, and you basically use that to version your code to keep a track of what all changes happen. So this is kind of a sub-versioning system that almost every studio uses to keep a track of their codes. And individually you can do it as well. So like I have a GitHub account where I would upload whatever work I've done, like personal projects, not the office work. Personal projects we're working on. People can go and take a look, see what you have done. They can try it out. They can contribute it if they want. So that's like kind of a community, open source community.
I will add your GitHub link in the description of this video as well, so anyone is interested can check there. So I mean, we are living in an era where like we can see a lot of series and movies as well in our living room. We don't have to go to theaters and all the things. So in the recent releases, like which is your favorite movie in this year especially?
I have to think a bit which movie would be my
movie or series. There are many, right?
Yeah, there are a few. Like I quite enjoy the docu series that Netflix put out. Like I just finished up Cocaine Cowboys sometime back. So anything that's related to something that has actually happened is what intrigues me. It's just the how they've edited it. So I am a stickler for working out, okay, fine, if this has been edited well or not, does the story progress as well or not. So for me, yeah, Cocaine Cowboys currently is kind of my favorite one for now.
So I guess you are not a big fanboy of Marvel and DC, I guess.
No, I am obviously.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's something that, but I haven't checked out Loki and the other series that's
and yeah, I mean they have a lot of follow-up series in like for the next 3-4 years. I think Marvel has a plan of releasing series every now and then.
Yeah.
And it's going to be great.
That's how it's going to be, right? Because you just don't want to have the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You want the Marvel, TV universe as well built up. Because everything is interlinked, right? At the end of the day, they are spreading out that universe to have they're working on the multiverse side of things.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm definitely huge. I'm looking forward to Dune to get released. So it's like excited.
That's a big movie.
Yeah,
everybody's waiting.
I would want to finish up the book first. So I'm like, yeah.
You're reading? Okay, that's great. Yeah, understood. So if you're watching a movie, you worked especially. So do you think about the pipeline stuff you worked on that movie, or you are lucky to enjoy the movie without any distraction?
No, I think the creative side in me still comes out quite a bit. So my wife
judging the shots when we see the movie.
Yeah, I was saying like my wife's a VFX compo, right? So both of us end up discussing a bit about like I love to.
That's a curse of being an artist, right?
Like, I love to imagine how much work goes in stuff like fur or cloth animation. Like I love anything that comes out from Laika, the stop motion animation thing, because it's just not that stop motion animation. It's how they went through from 3D printing the expressions to using that. So it's crazy, like the way
Laika's work. Yeah, I've seen many such movies. Yeah.
Amazing, like
they're awesome.
That thing that intrigues me, and I end up starting looking at how this is interacting.
I will always think about the patience they have while doing the shoot.
No, of course, and I think from a pipeline point of view, from a TV point of view, you start thinking about how the asset management happens. Like when you see a city being built up, like how I think this was Big Hero 6. I think Pixar's Big Hero 6, when they did the whole San Tokyo, so they did a mix of San Francisco and Tokyo, and how they managed all that. Like I think they ended up doing a new Hyperion renderer. So it's all of that is very interesting. Like just reading a bit. So while watching the movie, it's fun and good. Like you can watch it, but then after that, okay, what happened? Like for Interstellar, for that example, right? Like the math paper that they brought out on how actually a black hole would look like. It was a really good read, like just to read up about how much background things were. So
I think they hired some scientist or mathematician for building up that concepts and all, I guess.
Yeah. They did actually prove it. So that's cool.
That's a great movie, yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about the movie stuff and all, let's move into the mental and healthy lifestyle in our industry. So how important is staying mentally and physically fit in our industry? And also I have a question like, does this matter to a pipeline guy as well? Because usually as a comper or as a pipeline, as a road paint or any other department as well, they will end up doing a lot of overtime and crazy work hours. So I just want to know like how is your work style and how is your working hours?
So I think it's a big misconception. When you go into pipeline, there is no overtime. No, we try to avoid overtime as much as possible. Like the thing is, we have certain so our deliverables are very different from what you are based on the client one. But then ours is more internal development work. But then we also have our own timelines. Like, for example, if someone from the global head of pipeline says that, no, I want to get this released Monday. So you would want to make sure that things are ready for that. So if you have to do overtime, you end up doing overtime. Like right now, we are trying to deploy something that's important. So I end up starting off my work at 6:30 in the morning. So but then I balance my hours. So that's something that's freedom for us, because I can, at my level, I can do that. But I have, like in back in Mumbai, I have done a lot of overtime. To be honest, I would my average days work close to 12 to 13 hours. So it's not like, oh, you're doing 8 to 9 hours every day. No, I did 12 hours every day. But that's because we were building something. That's because there was a lack of support teams. But as soon as things started getting in place, then you end up, you manage it well. But again, that's the thing. For us, we have a lot of sitting job. We have a lot of head scratching when we're trying to figure out something. So definitely the mental and physical aspect is very, very important. Like for me specifically, physical fitness is important, because I've had situations where I've let go for a couple of years, and then you could see the effects going on in your body. So right now I ensure that at least I am running through the week. I do my runs irrespective of whatever the climate is, whatever the temperature is. I've ran in -13 at one point in Montreal. So it's just, you have to push yourself. For mental health, I would see the problem in in at least not here, but back in India, has been accepting that there is a mental health issue, or there are issues related to mental health. I would say if you are having issues, talk to someone, talk to a professional, not specifically someone, but talk to a professional, get help, because if you don't do that, it's going to affect your work, it's going to affect your personal life, it's going to affect your obviously professional life as well. And then you won't be able to perform, or you won't be able to work, or you won't be able to see things clearly. Because everyone has had that issue. I would say personally, I've had an issue where, because of the work, so much work, that you are constantly irritated, you're constantly angry, you're shouting at people, which is not nice. You shouldn't be doing that. It's not, you are working in a professional environment. You should not behave like that. But because there were certain factors that you can't control, so then I had a different way of handling that. I was lucky that it didn't go as bad that I had to go to a professional, but then I started working out a bit more, started reading. I had stopped reading for like 3 years in between. I'm an ardent reader, but then I picked that up, forced myself to pick it up, made sure that I fixed my working hours again, because I could do that, or I had the liberty to do it. Then fixed it, made sure that I would follow a routine. Every hour just walk up, take just walk around, so that your back isn't that screwed up. Then all these small things you have to keep into mind. Physical fitness, for sure. Like I have seen people just constantly on the machine for 6-7 hours straight. I don't think that's good. Just every hour, just wake up. Like people have the habit of keeping water bottles on their workplace so that they can just drink the water. I would not do that. I would keep a glass. So every time that gets over, I will force myself to get up, go to the water cooler, fill it up, and then come back. So all these things help you in the longer run. If it's just I don't know, touch wood, I don't take that many medical leaves, just because I think how your lifestyle also helps. Like I've seen people going from bad to worse because they didn't change their lifestyle, but I've seen people who have completely turned around the lifestyle, and they're doing amazing. Like mentally, physically.
In one of my podcasts, Rohit Nayak, he told about this topic, like how important it is to stay positive and preserve our mental health to a good vibe. And he was doing. Go ahead.
I was saying, like, he's absolutely right, because when you think about it, for example, I've seen this happening from both creative side of view and pipeline side of view as well. Like you're working on a shot, right? You're concentrating on that shot. You're sending it for approvals. You're sending it through the supervisors and everything.
Yeah.
It's not getting approved, and it's getting kicked back just because, oh, can you make it look better? And then that frustration builds up, you know.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? I'm not doing it. I'm not competent enough. You know, all these questions start creeping up.
It can turn into an ego. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and then you not even ego, but you're pushing yourself down. You're doubting yourself. Like, forget ego. Ego would be, no, I can be just the best. You know, I can't never be wrong. But this is like, oh, am I right? Can I always be right? Like, you know,
self-doubt.
Self-doubting questions come. You know, have self-doubts. So positivity would be like, okay, understand that no, this is the part of the process. You can't get away from. From pipeline as well. Like, if you are giving a near impossible problem to solve, you're thinking, oh, I'll approach it this way. Oh, I'll approach it this way. I'll spend, like, I have literally spent 2 weeks trying to fix a bug. And then I'm thinking like, shit, should I be in Python or not? Like,
yeah, it happens. Yeah.
You know, you start thinking in your head, like, you know, but then you're like, no, hold on. It's okay. Like, some people have already tried. They have failed. You're also doing it. We're also human. It's perfectly fine. Take your time. Relax. Then the logic is that, okay, step away from it, do something else, and then jump back to it. Because that, you know, gets your mind off it. Take a break, you know, just go out for a small walk, get some coffee. Like, I used to do that back when we were actually going to work as well. When things would get heavy, or, you know, you can't just concentrate. Go down. The area is nice. Even if it's winters, the area is still nice. Just go down, have some coffee, come back with a fresher mind, fresher outlook, and jump back.
Of course. Got it. And Rohit was speaking about meditation and all this stuff. And it really calms our mind and gives a fresh perspective, as you told. And like, according to you, like, reading is also a kind of meditation, I would say, like that.
Yes.
Right.
I can't meditate. Like, I don't know why, but I can't meditate. It's good if you meditate. If you can, it's really good. I don't know. I can't, unfortunately. But for me, the other thing is, like, I would listen to some old classic songs, you know, classic rock, or, you know, those classic Bollywood songs as well. Like, I have a very mixed playlist. Listen to those, or read a book, you know, just do that. Like,
I have read an article like meditation is very overhyped. People thinks like meditation, everyone thinks like that, okay, we have to sit and we have to close our eyes. So I have read an article like they have written in a way like meditation is not like sitting and just closing our eyes and just thinking. I mean, we don't have to think anything, nothing like that. If we are very good in reading, if we likes reading, just go on reading. That is also a kind of meditation. If you likes to draw pictures, go on drawing pictures, so that we'll forget ourselves, and that pressure or whatever it is built in our head, it will just ease off. So I would say that is also a kind of meditation. There are a lot of
ways. Like, I have a very weird way, like, I love to cook, right? So for me, that is kind of a meditation that takes my, you know,
got it,
head out of things. I would cook something good, and then then you feel better, right?
Yeah. So, but the topic of mental and physical health is very important.
It is absolutely important. If someone says that, you know, this is not, he's like, he's sorry, he's bullshitting. Like, you can't do that. Physical fit, because it's all goes hand in hand, right? If you're not physically fit, your mental health will deteriorate. If you're not mentally fit, you can't concentrate on your physical fitness as well. Like, go out for a walk, and if you're not feeling good in your head, you'll be like, no, I just want to go back home, or I want to, you know, curl up in the bed. I would want to get up from bed. So you won't do that. So it goes hand in hand. I would say, for a young, I have done that mistake. I'm pretty sure you would have done that as well. When you started off, you only concentrated on work. You wouldn't give a shit about anything else.
100%, yeah.
You know, every VFX, you know, fresher has done that. And I don't blame them. That's how the work culture is. At least back in India, that's how the work culture is. They concentrate on, oh, you haven't spent, you know, 23 hours out of 24 at work. How? You know, you're slacking off. That's not good. But then you miss that part, and then you realize it once you're reaching, it's really 30s, sad to say, but you're reaching 30s, you start seeing the effects. Like, one of my best friends, she had an issue with her back because of obviously the same thing. But then she actually had to spend a lot of time, you know, at least 1.5 years just working on her back, on her core, and on her fitness to get back to what she's doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's crazy. You can't just, you know, sit down and just work endless hours and, you know, not expected to, you know.
No shots or no studios will come in our mind if we are not well.
Yeah, of course. Like, no, obviously not. Why would they? That's the thing, right? Like, you can't. If you're in pain, you concentrate on your pain, right? It starts affecting your everything. Like, forget work. For me, work would be secondary, but your personal life will get affected, which is good.
Got it. So I have a question like, what is the future of open source software in the coming days? I mean, there is a like Blender is now super efficient, and also Unreal is a great thing, which is happening as an open source. So how are you seeing the future of open source software?
See, it's a mixed bag. I tell you why. It's there are a lot of open source software that we use in VFX, like every studio use. May it not be from the creative point of view, but from the support point of view, or from pipeline point of view. Blender, again, amazing. Like it's one of the best softwares out there that you can work on. The problem is the amount of studios that have paid Autodesk the money to license the software. There are a lot, right? And then the thing is, if you go out and go on LinkedIn and search for, I want people who are proficient in Blender, you would come across, let's say, out of a group of 100, there might be 10 people. But if you have look at the same 100 people and say proficient in Maya, 90 would say that, yeah, I'm proficient in Maya. If you just have to bring me in and I'll work on it, right? You don't need retraining. You don't need anything. So I think that's what's blocking. But again, there's a good thing that there are some smaller studios who are adapting Blender as the main. Forget bigger, smaller studios. Even Framestore has a Blender pipeline. So we are doing that. A lot of studios have Unreal pipeline because that's the next best thing for virtual production, right? So again, it's just if you get support, open source softwares die off because they don't get enough support and enough love from the community. Everyone wants it, but then they need actual support, like for developers as well. Like Blender community has some amazing developers for the software. But then it needs to be a constant inflow. It has to be a constant, influx of people who are supporting it. There are studios, bigger studios. How do you think Maya got at this stage? Because it got feedback from, heavy hitters like ILM, Framestore, and like the big five, right? DNEG and all that. Because they constantly gave them feedback. Shotgun got better because it got feedback from a lot of other bigger studios. I think similar would happen when a big studio decides, hey, I want to use Blender as my tool. I want to use Blender as, okay, this is my software, this is I'm going to use, I'm going to build all my pipeline tools around it. I have an issue with it. So I'll report it to Blender. It will get fixed in the next iteration. That's how it will get better and better and better. So there is scope. I would not say that there is no scope for open source. It's just going to be a little bit slow and tedious process. Blender has been around for such a long time. Now it is taking its own, now people are understanding that we need to do Blender. We need to use Blender.
And for independent creators, this is a magical time. I mean, they can just straight away download the software and start working on that.
Like I have Blender on my both my workstation and my laptop, because
even me as well.
I want to model something, it's fairly quick. I don't want to do the licensing bit for Maya. I can't afford it. It's as simple as that. Blender, at least I can do something, figure out something, create an OBJ and export it and use it in Unreal.
That's it. Great. And so like I'm following a channel in YouTube. The channel name is Dust, and what they does is like they're releasing short films on visual effects and animation related things, and those are very awesome contents, and I'm seeing a lot of boom in for creators, especially in YouTube. So if you are given an opportunity to be part of such a short film project with lots of CG and visual effects, so how you will generally build a pipeline for this kind of short work? And can you explain this in simple terms with taking all those programming kind of stuff? Because for creators, it could overload their mind.
Of course. Personally, I find one thing that people miss, but they realize it fairly quickly when the project gets bigger, or when they have more people on the project. Like if it's just you or two people working on it, it's much easier. It's how you manage your assets, right? Or how you create your folder structure. So I was a couple of days back, I was just, me and my wife were talking about this, and I was just showing her, how you can write a quick tool to figure out your folder structures. And both of us were discussing the same thing, where it's easy when it's just you, because you know how to save things, where do you want to save things, what name should that file be, or if you're generating, let's say, a texture map, right, for an asset, you know how to name it because it's just you. But imagine if there are 10 people and then there are 10 iterations working from home on their personal projects. So let's say it's a shared network storage. Now, if I go off on a vacation, or if I'm not part of the company anymore, and you have to pick up my work, you start searching, right? You think, where the hell did you keep it, right? Because it's completely different. So the biggest bang for the buck for me to set up an asset management system. Now, if you want to link it with your production management, if you're using Shotgun, or if you're using Excel sheets or whatever, you can link it with that. That way, at least as soon as a new shot starts up, you know exactly how the structure would be, how you can manage it. Because as a creative individual, you don't want to spend time creating folders, managing folders, copying stuff from here and there, or trying to find the stuff that you want from the third person. You don't want to do that. So I would start off with building that. Now this would be the most bare bone system. The second one would be two things I would work on. That would be inputting, ingestion, or deliveries. Now, because if you are talking to a client, if you're talking to a new vendor, right? Like it's just not you who's working on it. You have given some work to, let's say, a freelancer, right? He gives you his work in his own way. Now you might not want to use that. So that would be the ingestion process. Would just rename it to the way you want, make sure that there are no mistakes. So have that. It could be very simple as just take the files, rename them, and place them in the short folder where it should be. Let's say, for example, you asked for mats, right? Roto mats. And for that shot, so the guy gave you with his weird naming convention. You take that, rename it under that shot, under Roto mats, you keep that as version 1. He gives you another version. You can just start as version 2. So now there's no confusion between which version to use, which version not to use. Deliveries is now if there are 10 people who are working on it, right? On working on that. So I would say I would have a tool that would render these out as AXRs or DPXs or whichever I want. Do I want to apply some LUT on it? Do I want to review it? I can overlay on it. The shot name, the artist name, the frame numbers. That's very, very easy to do. I can build that, and then if you want to review it, load everything in RV. I can write a tool to push that on the RV, like the editorial system. If you want to export all of that, you can take the raw images, combine them, and that's your delivery. So these would be the most bare bone basic stuff that you can do, and it takes out the manual intervention. That's what I think that's my belief is for a pipeline person is to remove those manual ticks where you would end up doing mistakes, because it's very easy to replace underscore with a dash or a hyphen, and that has consequences.
Great. I mean,
that's
an awesome answer for this question. Like, it is completely in simple terms and everyone could understand that.
I think that's the basic. Like I might sound very arrogant on this, but I expect every studio, even if it's small, to have this process built in. It helps streamline things. Once you decide, hey, now I'm working with 10, I want to work with 100 people, I want to expand my studio, or I want to collaborate with a bigger studio. This helps. This really actually helps down the line.
Of course, got it. I mean, this podcast was very informative. I would say that I learned a lot. I understood a lot. And finally, my last question is like, can you motivate us with some tips and tricks you follow to be successful in your career, and also to be a healthy and peaceful person?
Okay.
Pretty interesting question.
That's an interesting question. So I would say for first of all, I would want to accept that it has been difficult couple of years, 2020, 2021.
Of course.
I would say just if you have wherever you are, just be thankful that you went through this pandemic. This is the worst thing that anyone could have ever faced, and you're coming out stronger to the other end.
Yeah.
And I would say keep on learning. This has been a good time to learn, to improve your skills, to take up new challenges. Luckily, with the amount of boom that we have in the VFX industry, because now everything wants to get done, you could have good opportunities. So again, keep learning. Don't say that no, I've learned enough. Don't ever do that. Always find a new challenge. Start off a new project. Okay, I won't say you have to finish it up, but always it's the journey that is more important. It could be as silly as, I want to have an Arduino and display something. It's very basic, but then you start learning more about things. It's just the amount of information that you can have. It's very well and good. That's what you would want, because that will give you confidence in your job and in your down the line as well. Take risks, take those challenges up, saying, hey, I want to do a new shot. I want to get more complicated shot. As from a creator point of view, go and do it. Talk to the worst thing that they will do is they will say no. Whatever, that's my funda. Worst thing that happened, they'll tell me, it's okay, cool, man. We'll try out next time. But keep on pushing yourself, keep on doing yourself. And again, as I think we did covered it up during the physical and the mental question.
Yes.
Find out what calms you down.
Mm-hmm.
May it be reading, may it be cooking, may it be listening to music, may it be watching Korean soap operas. Who knows? Like, it could be anything. If you can meditate, well and good. There is so much stuff out there that can help you, keep yourself better. But if you think that nothing is working, I would actually kind of beg you to just go to a professional, talk. There is no harm in doing it. If you think there is a stigma around it, then I definitely give that person my number and I'll shout at that person. But no, please don't double think that you don't need to do that. Physical fitness, if the climate is good, go out for a run, go out for a walk. Start off with walking, go out for a jogging. If you have a cycle, do the cycling. But if you can, gymming I would not say, because I'm still skeptical because of the pandemic. I would not.
Not preferred.
Things get better. Just do some or the other activity. Could be a sport, could be table tennis, could be badminton, could be anything. Pick up something. Just keep yourself physically motivated. Again, challenge yourself there as well. So.
All right. I mean, I would just summarize, like, visual effects artists should tell, thanks to pandemic. I should not tell this, and I'm sorry for this, but we are having a lot of projects and we are working from home. This is like we never thought of working from home, and it happened. So we should thank pandemic, but not on a general platform.
I would thank my
people will scold us
and IT teams who were able to provide us with that.
Got it. So thanks, Piyush, for spending time with us in this podcast, and it was really great, man. And any final comments or anything?
I would say keep on watching Burj's video channel. He's putting out some great content. Please do take a look at it. There have been some amazing people on the podcast. I've seen them
I would say this is kind of my meditation, doing podcasts and doing videos.
see, you found yours.
Yeah. So see you, man. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, man. Take care.